Good morning from Riverton, Wyoming this week, folks. With me being out of state once again, you know what that means. Yep, I'm back to work. You may have also noticed that I did not put out an episode last Monday. If you think campaigning kept me busy during the month of July, imagine wrapping up a campaign coupled with household chores and getting ready for another 3 week engagement out of state with the added bonus of visiting 3 states I have not been to yet with my current client. Lodging, airfare, rental car reservations made for Mississippi, Montana, Wyoming, and North Dakota. I wrapped up my final visit for the foreseeable future to Mississippi on this past Saturday, and then I began the long trek to Wyoming. And as usual, there were flight delays and missed connections. Let me tell you though, the plane ride from Denver to Casper City, that was an experience. Not only were the seats on that plane the narrowest that I have been encountered in a long time, the final approach for the first attempt, yes, first attempt at landing, it was a wild ride. It felt like I was on one of those mechanical bulls. In fact, after we landed, the pilot thanked everybody for not puking on the plane. The storm and winds shifted dramatically during the initial approach so badly that the pilot had to wave off the landing and try again from a different direction. Then we had to sit on the tarmac for nearly 40 minutes because of the lightning in the area. That lightning prevented the ground crew from guiding the plane to the gate as well as offloading the luggage. Now, once I got into the two-gate terminal in Casper City, it was another long wait for airline personnel to get my luggage that somehow made the connection that I missed in Denver, as well as a long wait at the rental car counter. Following that, there was a 2-hour drive from the airport to my current location. My travel day started at 4 a.m. Central Time, so I was up a couple hours before that, and did not end until 9 p.m. Mountain Time. My Apple Watch told me I had 22 stand hours yesterday. It was incredible. And I was completely exhausted by the time I got my luggage into my room. So let's get on with this week's episode of the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast, where I will discuss why principled leadership is important. So let's take a stand in the arena together again this week, folks, and get on with the show. Oh, almost forgot about the disclaimer. Now that the campaign is over, we will dispense with reading that. Welcome to the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast. On this show, we will discuss the assaults on our liberty by the very institution we the people created to secure our liberty. We will also compare and contrast the actions of people in leadership positions to the servant leadership that is needed to protect our God-given, constitutionally protected rights. Additionally, we will break down the many lies that elected and unelected officials in government and media spin every day in order to secure for themselves positions of power and influence that are antithetical to the system of government our founding fathers created and passed down to us. Your host on this program is Larry Linton, a 30-year veteran of the United States Navy who also runs his own leadership consulting company. He is also a candidate for the Republican Party's nomination to represent Tennessee's House District 12, which includes Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Pittman Center, Weirs Valley, Seymour, and parts of Sevierville, and most of Sevier County. So here is your host, Larry Linton. Okay, folks, first let me say it's good to be back with you. And as you know, there's been a lot that has happened since I last spent time with the audience. First, of course, is the elephant in the room, and that's the fact that the primary election is over with, and it turns out I lost to the establishment candidate. Not a huge surprise, but there are some factors that are just as disappointing as the loss. We'll get into that some more in a bit, as well as in the next segment and how it ties in with this week's episode on principled leadership. Oh, I hope you all remember the number or percentage that I shared with you all in a previous episode. It too plays a role in this week's title as well as the primary election. That number was 24%. That is apparently a very magical number here in Sevier County, as we'll discuss later as well. Before we get into that, and because it has been a couple of weeks since we were last together, there is a bunch more to recap, and not just with the campaign. As I mentioned in the intro, I'm back to work after taking a full month off to work on the campaign. And despite the outcome, it was a pleasure getting to visit with so many people from all areas of the county. What saddens me, though, is that even though I talked to hundreds of people and my social media advertisements that were only targeted to the zip codes in House District 12, they reached more than 106,000 people, which is more than the population of the entire county. But less than 5,000 people showed up and voted in the primary. All in all, only 10% of the voters in House District 12 cast a vote in that primary election. Now, I believe the magic number of 24%, again, we'll discuss that later. I do believe 24% played a role in this primary, but not as big of a role as only 10% of the registered voters in District 12 participating in this primary election. Just how does this tie into this week's topic? Well, we'll define principled leadership in a bit, but principled leadership requires principled followership. If less than 4,800 people are determining who represents approximately 70,000 people and 45,000 registered voters in the halls of government, you end up with unprincipled leaders. Because unprincipled leaders bank on the apathy of the electorate to keep themselves and their pals in positions of power and control. As I have stated in the past, because of the apathy of the electorate, in addition to the machinations of how the political parties have set up elections in the state of Tennessee, keep in mind though, the primary election is the election for who represents Tennesseans in the General Assembly. Just think about it. The primary elections for General Assembly representation, and let's not forget also for County Commission representation, those elections are separated from national election primaries. Here in Tennessee, we held the presidential preference primary in March of this year, where President Trump overwhelmingly won with 83% of the vote in Sevier County. And the next time he will be on the ballot will be for the November general election. The vote totals for that primary were abysmal too, though. In that presidential primary, only a bit over 9,600 people voted in the entire county. That is out of 45,000 registered voters in District 12, in addition to the number of registered voters in the part of Sevier County that represents District 17. When people say that they are not involved and do not participate in quote unquote politics, well, that is simply a lie that is perpetuated by those that want to control the levers of power. Because whether those people like it or not, politics plays a role in their lives, a big one. And when fewer and fewer people participate in our system of self governance, they are allowing the political class, those establishment people, whether they're part of the communists or the good old boys, they are allowing that political class to control their lives. With that being said, let's look at what principled leadership means. I dug up the following from an article in Forbes magazine that was written by Nicholas Munson from Marymount College. He writes that principled leadership refers to the fundamental beliefs and values that guide the practices, behaviors, and decision making in an organization. Now, an organization can mean a business, a governmental body, a club, or even a political organization, a political party. So, what does it mean to be a principled leader versus an unprincipled leader? It comes down to leaders aligning their values and goals with their organization's values and goals. In any level of government, local, state, or federal, that governmental organization means their values and goals should align with the Constitution in our republic. Principled leaders model the behavior they seek to reward in the organization. That is, they walk the talk. The author goes on to say there are 5 things a person can do to become a more principled leader. Now, as I go through these 5 things, I ask the audience to compare them to what we see in our current and now future elected officials, be they members of the county commission or going on to be part of the General Assembly, or even compare them to what we see in the Sevier County Republican Party or the Tennessee Republican Party. Now, here we go. Number one, encourage communication. That means a principled leader is to support a culture of collaboration and open communication within their teams through regular feedback sessions. They actively listen when team members discuss their goals, challenges, and progress. An open dialogue will allow the individual to identify areas for improvement and share best practices, fully engage in these conversations, and lead by example regarding receiving and giving feedback. Have we seen that with the executive committee of both the Sevier County and Tennessee Republican parties? You know the answer to that. Did we see that during the GOP primary campaign here in Sevier County? Well, from a couple of candidates we did. Also, cognitive diversity in teams is powerful. Building teams with individuals who challenge the status quo and bring diverse viewpoints can fuel a culture of innovation. More importantly, instill a culture where missteps are accepted and then resolved collaboratively. These principled leaders lead with humility. Acknowledge you may not possess all the answers and embrace input from team members to avoid cognitive entrenchment. Sounds like good old boy network there. Again, I would like to point out, when was the last time the Sevier County Republican Party and its leadership, Chairman Michael Hodges, Vice Chair Muriel Simpson, Secretary Amber Adams, Treasurer Andrew Temple, and the others of the executive committee, when was the last time you saw or heard about any of them holding an open meeting with the members of the Republican Party here in the county? That would be a long time. I've lived in the county for more than 7 years now, and outside of a couple of events where the party is hosting speakers like Congresswoman Harshbarger or Tennessee Attorney General Scaretti, there have been no public meetings where the rank and file members of the party had any say whatsoever in how the party conducts business. If you look back over the past few Sevier County GOP reorganization meetings, which happen every odd year, you will see that it is the same people that vote over and over to keep the same group of people in charge. The Sevier County GOP does not represent the Republican voters here in the county. It only represents those good old boys that work in and around the county courthouse. That would be why our county's GOP's reorganization meetings is the only one in the entire state that conducts those during the middle of the workday, in the middle of the work week, and at the courthouse. That doesn't seem strange at all now, does it? Again, without principled followers, you will get unprincipled leaders. Now, next up, number two, that would be to recognize and reward accomplishments. Always recognize team members for their hard work and team contributions. Life is challenging today on many fronts, so when your followers shine, let them know their efforts are appreciated. The art of acknowledging and rewarding people takes center stage in the playbook of principled leaders. We've talked about that before as one of the most underutilized power bases a leader employs. In the case of the Sevier County GOP, it's a self-licking ice cream cone because it is the same good old boys recognizing the same good old boys because they do not let others play in their sandbox. Moving on to number three, empowering and developing strong teams. Principled leaders understand that the success and progress of their organization are heavily reliant on the growth and effectiveness of their team. Principled leaders also know a shared purpose is vital to organizational success. To accomplish that, the principled leader needs to actively engage in practices that empower and nurture their teams to create an environment where everybody can thrive and contribute to their full potential. They trust their team members to make decisions and take ownership of their work. Doing so fosters a sense of autonomy and accountability among team members. Principled leadership calls for being committed to the professional development of teams. They offer training programs, encourage attendance at conferences, or promote continuous learning to empower those teams. Investing in the development of their people and the team will keep its focus on growth and organizational excellence. When was the last time you heard or read about the Sevier County GOP doing anything like that? I mean, outside of their annual fundraiser, by the way, where do those funds go? Outside of the annual fundraiser and their annual Lincoln Day dinner, what events like those I just described does the Sevier County GOP and its leadership engage in? While I was home campaigning in July, I watched the annual 4th of July parade that happens in Gatlinburg. Lots of floats participated in that parade, even one by the Sevier County Democrats. We won't get into the deviants that were on that float during that parade. Just know that it looked like some of them were ready to lead their own drag queen story hour in a local elementary school or a public library. But you know what? They had a float. They were representing their particular brand, even though it's an evil one, but still, they were representing their brand to the community. Does the Sevier County GOP even do anything remotely similar outside of their two events, where it's mostly just the good old boys getting dressed up and patting themselves on the back? Any sort of community outreach? Of course not. They are not interested in that because they lack principled leaders. Okay, folks, we're up against the time for a break. I'll come back on the other side and talk about the remaining two items a principled leader needs to do, along with explaining the magic number of 24%. So stand by. We'll be right back. Okay, folks, we're back. Let's continue on with the remaining two things a principled leader or principled leadership in an organization needs to do. Number 4 is that the leader or leadership team needs to recognize the value of we versus I. By emphasizing we over I, a leader acknowledges their organization's success as a result of the combined contributions of the team. One of the critical ways principled leaders recognize the value of we is by promoting teamwork and collaboration. They create an environment where individuals work harmoniously, pooling their skills, knowledge, and experience to achieve common goals. This collaborative spirit fosters innovation as diverse perspectives and ideas come together to tackle complex challenges. There are many challenges happening right now across the state, and principled leaders need to encourage collaboration while actively participating in and supporting team efforts, setting an example for others to follow. A principled leader, they motivate their team and reinforce that success is a shared endeavor. In doing this, they can create a culture where everyone feels valued and empowered. Let me ask the members of the Republican Party here in Sevier County if they feel that their efforts are valued. Do they feel like they are empowered by the Sevier County GOP? Or do they, and I'm including myself in they, do we feel like our vote, not really our vote, is the fact that our county is what one would call a supermajority red county? Is that fact taken for granted? Of course it is. In fact, some words along those lines were spoken at the March 2023 Sevier County GOP reorganization meeting, where the newly elected chairman spoke something like that. He stated, "We don't need to change what is already working," or some other such nonsense, which, that's what I believe to be the most dangerous words in the English language. That's the way we've always done it. Meanwhile, we are all witnesses to the growing involvement by the Sevier County Democrats and their allies in the alphabet mafia right here in supermajority red Sevier County, and the involvement, or lack thereof, by GOP county leadership will be looked back upon ultimately as what doomed the party here. Now let's get on to number 5, and that is a principled leader must strive for fairness. You longtime listeners know I have a lot to say about this as well. But anyway, fairness is about equal opportunities and cultivating an environment where everyone has an equal chance to succeed, instead of tipping the scales or putting their thumb on the scales for a preferred candidate, if you know what I mean. A principled leader ensures that everyone has the support needed to grow and contribute to a positive and productive environment. Committing to fairness can help you create a sense of well being within the organization, and it extends beyond policy adherence. It embodies a dedication to upholding your the organization's values, not the good old boy network's values. A principled leader will contribute to a positive and productive organizational environment to ensure everyone's unique strengths are recognized. This commitment will build a culture where everyone on the team feels valued and driven to contribute to the success of the team. Unless you've been living under a rock and allowing the establishment to take your voted for granted here in Sevier County, or you are operating by the belief that politics is just not in your wheelhouse, you know that the leadership of the Sevier County GOP, along with their pals in the county commission, they do the opposite of this. Now, based upon several things I've heard going on behind the scenes of not just my campaign, but the campaign of now outgoing State Senator Frank Nicely, it is plain to see that the good old boys here in Sevier County are most assuredly not principled leaders. It turns out that certain members of the county commission and others around the periphery of the Sevier County GOP leadership team, they were making phone calls to voters in the county to vote against Frank Nicely in the primary. You see, those people could not get what they wanted out of Frank in the state Senate, so they had to ensure he was defeated in the primary by voting for the guy that was primarily supported by out-of-state PAC money and was somebody without a track record that was sold to the people of Sevier County as being a true conservative. This was the first election after redistricting that Frank Nicely was on the ballot here in Sevier County. And his actual conservatism in the General Assembly did not sit well with the good old boys that are running the show here. Frank was not as easily moved or swayed as was our previous state senator, Art Swan. So, in the minds of the good old boys, old Frank had to go. To be sure, though, I don't know of any Sevier County GOP executive committee members making calls like that. But other good old boys, they did. One in particular, who, by the way, drives around 3 cars that are paid for by the taxpayers here in this county, and somebody who is knee deep in just about every aspect, shady or otherwise, of Sevier County politics, did make those calls. The same calls were made by somebody deeply involved with the good old boys on the county commission and county GOP executive committee. That person has sold himself as somebody completely different than the fake conservative I immediately took him to be after my first meeting with him many years ago. Anyway, a principled leader needs to embrace those 5 principles as pillars to build an ethical organizational culture. If you and I and the rest of the Republican voters choose principled leaders in the future, vice the current set of unprincipled leaders, I think that we'll find that our quote unquote team members will ultimately feel valued, empowered, and inspired to contribute to the shared triumphs of the future Sevier County GOP. Because of the unprincipled leadership of what we currently have, the voters of House District 12 had decided to send a good old boy, an unprincipled leader, to the Tennessee House of Representatives. Also, because of the unprincipled leadership of the Sevier County GOP and its pals, one of the staunchest conservatives in the Tennessee Senate has been sent packing in favor of a person willing to sell their vote to out-of-state money groups. This group of good old boys in Sevier County cares nothing for freedom and liberty or conservatism at all. What they do care about is power and control. Maybe the voters can send a message to the good old boys during the November election and express their displeasure by writing in a candidate's name on the ballot for those 2 positions. Don't write my name in and don't write Frank's name in, though. We lost the primary election, and under Tennessee election law, we couldn't be elected as a write-in candidate. I'm just saying write in anybody else's name. Heck, it could be Daffy Duck, just anybody. Or if anybody qualifies to get on the ballot as a write-in candidate between now and then. put that person's name down. Send the good old boys a message. As for me, there are some things that I am working on that if they bear fruit, it can result in changing things up here over the next couple of years. As I put them together, I'll let you know. But let's now get to that magic number of 24% that I mentioned previously. The longtime listeners to the show also, they might know what I'm alluding to here. But if you don't, here's a bit of background. Back in 2021 or 2022, the end of 2021, when word got out about the Sevier County Board of Education purchasing the social emotional learning curriculums, those divisive, corrosive, and sexualizing curriculums, it was determined that there was new leadership needed on the Board of Education. In 2022, 3 of the 5 seats on the board were up for election, and 3 conservative candidates put their name in the hat to run against the good old boys. For School Board District 1, out of the 2,231 votes cast, the conservative Miss Angelica Hanley received 526 votes, while the establishment good old boy candidate Mike Oakley received 1,705 votes. The conservative lost to the establishment by receiving roughly 24% of the vote. For School Board District 3, out of the 1,600 votes cast, the conservative Mr. Steve Parks received 376 votes, while the establishment good old boy candidate Mark Strange received 1,224 votes. The conservative lost to the establishment by receiving roughly 24% of the vote. Keep in mind, this is the same Mark Strange that received special treatment for his business by the city of Sevierville earlier this year. Special treatment that many other businesses have been denied as it relates to sewage and plumbing services. Moving along to School Board District 5, out of the 1,979 votes cast, keep in mind, you notice all those vote totals are different. The conservative Miss Mariah Bailey received 469 votes, while the establishment good old boy candidate Kevin Townsend received 1,510 votes. Once again, the conservative primary challenger lost to the establishment incumbent by receiving roughly 24% of the vote. Now, in this most recent primary for House District 12, out of the 4,797 votes cast, the actual conservative challenger, and that would be me, I received 1,167 votes, which is roughly 24% of the vote. Something else to keep in mind, though, folks, and that during the November 2022 general election, where I was running as an independent, meaning I did not have an R after my name on the ballot, I received nearly 3 times the number of votes, where I garnered 2,796. During this primary, I had much more advertising and volunteer support, as well as in-person, internet, and social media presence in the district. Yet, according to the machines, I received only 1/3 of the votes I received in November of 2022. It seems like primary elections in Sevier County always result in the conservative challenger to the good old boy network. They only receive 24% of the vote. Things that make you go, right? Or things that make you think, tell me you're an algorithm without telling me you're an algorithm. There's also this little fact. During the primary, a member of the Alphabet Mafia group here in Sevier County bragged on one of my social media advertisements that she, her, it, or whatever she wants to refer to herself as. She bragged that she and other members of her extortion group, the Alphabet Mafia, voted against me in the GOP primary. They crossover voted. That is a crime in the state of Tennessee. A crime that I reported to the district attorney's office here in Sevier County, as well as to the state attorney general, along with the Secretary of State's office. Can you guess what they have done with that report as of today? Yeah, absolutely nothing. Par for the course for Tennessee politics, folks. Action or inaction, but only if it benefits the ruling elite. I'm going to take a break right here, and when I come back, I'll have my closing thoughts along with the wisdom from God's Word. So stick with me. I'll be right back. Yes, folks, we definitely have some unprincipled leadership in the organizations that where principled leadership is required to protect our freedoms. From the Sevier County Commission to the Sevier County Republican Party and on to the Tennessee Republican Party, all the way up to the higher offices like the Attorney Generals and Secretary of States. How did we get here? Well, because we have unprincipled followers, and that would be the voters. Really, the registered voters that do not participate in our system of self governance. When you don't participate, in the words of somebody I listen to quite frequently, when we don't participate, we get the government we deserve. By not participating, the good old boys expand their power and their control, or they allow the communists to grow in their influence. When 90% of the registered voters do not show up to the polls on election day, and even don't show up during the weeks of early voting, when that happens, those that have their hands on the levers of government control only entrench themselves deeper into those positions. Are they entrenched so deep that there's no way out of the mess we, the people, got ourselves into? I don't know. Maybe. It will take some work to turn it around. I do know this, though. I, and a very small number of fellow patriots, we cannot be the only ones doing the work. If you live here in Sevier County and would like to get more involved, just contact me. Send an email to larry@libertyleadershipandlies.com and let's work together to start laying the groundwork for what that will look like. Again, that is larry@libertyleadershipandlies.com. You can also share this podcast with other people you know that are sick and tired of what the good old boys here are doing to us. We must shift our focus from national elections to local elections. You cannot fix the federal government until you have your own house in order. And now for some wisdom from God's word. This week it comes to us from the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 4, verse 2. Now it is required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful. Our founding fathers have given each American citizen a trust that they paid for in blood and treasure. Other generations have paid in blood and treasure as well. We must prove ourselves faithful to that trust by sticking to our constitutional principles, along with ensuring those that we elect to represent us stick to those constitutional principles. So, folks, as always, I ask that you all stand in the arena with me. Stand in the arena for principled leadership. Stand in the arena for our constitutional republic. Until next week, let's stand in the arena together. Reveille, it's time to wake up.